Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and thank you so much for joining us. If you are live, we're live on Behance, we're live on YouTube. It's always great to hear from you. If you shout out in chat and let us know you're here, that's great. I can see Dark Hours is in chat looking after us as well. So if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, we'll be reading them throughout. We actually have two live streams today. So we're live with Jeremy Lord in a second, and well, right now, really, and then live with Dale Bagini. So we have 2 hours of content for you guys today, and some more on Thursday too. I can see Dino in the chat and Kane from Behance. How you going, guys? Yeah, let's. I got to turn myself off here. This is Jeremy Lord, everybody. Hello, Jeremy, and welcome to the stream.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be a warm-up act for Dale Bagini as well. So it's really good.
You're opening for Dale, are you?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that how you feel
Getting
about it?
getting the crowd ready. Yep, for sure. It's an honor, man. Absolute honor.
That's great. Yeah, he's a good guy, friend of
Yeah.
the show. We're all mates, but yeah, of course, fantastic illustrator and creator and designer and all sorts of stuff. Jeremy Lord, the man, the myth, the legend. And I'm looking at the poster that we have that you're going to be doing today, and I'm just got that
Yeah.
in my head now. Yeah. But yeah, so we're going to be doing some illustrations. So I know you got heaps to go through, so I'll shut up in a second. But yeah, this concept of this kind of movie poster thing, anywhere particular that it came to you in thought of doing this, or was there any particular inspiration that you thought that you'd be sharing some of this stuff with us today?
And more of a just kind of like a general kind of thing. Like for me, posters are kind of like the the most basic expression of design, right? You got like one image, you've got a whole bunch of elements that are graphic elements, type, illustration, photography, like all of the disciplines of graphic design, I think, are like concentrated into a poster and not just necessarily a movie poster. Um, but yeah, poster design is kind of like it's like the New York of graphic design. It's like you can make it here, you can make it
Right.
anywhere. If you can do a good poster, you can probably do good design across a bunch of other disciplines because it really just kind of unites all of those design fundamentals, and it's like the most like hardcore expression of designing to a brief and designing to an audience and getting a message across in a super short and effective manner. It's always been something that I've really loved working on. As an illustrator, I don't get to do it as often as maybe kind of another variant of a graphic design discipline. Um, but it's something that I kind of learned while I was studying, and it's really stuck with me. So I thought I would just kind of cover that today. Obviously, using illustration as the kind of the linchpin of that
Yep.
vibe, but yeah, we're going to talk about a bunch of different kind of design principles and design theory today, and going through the usual kind of sketching, getting inspiration, composition, all that kind of stuff. But it's just going to be a little bit more design centric, and illustration is just kind of like a tool to achieve that. So it's less about the illustration, I think.
Nice. Lovely. Okay, great. Well,
Yeah.
without further ado, let's see what you do. Is your screen black? Okay, good. Yeah, everything was black around, like you're in like that lightbox mode, and I had a bit of a panic then for a sec. But yeah, we've got your screen, and yeah, this is the poster I was looking at when I was like, I can't
Yeah.
get this kind of like the good, the bad, the ugly, like out of my head.
Yeah. And so just doing this because well, I mean, obviously it's a great movie. It's not necessarily like the Western vibe, and this sort of kind of visual style isn't necessarily something that you'll see kind of very much. If you go to like my website, you'll see like it's not really something that would kind of stand out in that. But it's this is an older one that I did kind of when I was studying actually. And it stuck to me. But the reason I thought I would use that is because it kind of covers a bunch of different things. First of all, we got a particular style and brief that we're going to go for, and we're going to touch upon that in a tick with some of the inspiration that we've got here in a Firefly board, and kind of what I'm going for that. So that's kind of step one of the brief. What are you trying to do? What's the style that you're kind of trying to get to with something like this? We're not necessarily going to be replicating this style exactly, although we might kind of play around with it. Um, so brief number one, and then kind of design inspiration, but also what's cool about this is this kind of like you've got three main characters. We've got a relatively solid chunk of type that we've got to work with. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge as well. It's not just kind of like something that's really nice and easy. Like, for instance, like if you look at this Jaws poster, it's a one word, easy, like we don't have to contend with a lot of type. So that's
Mm,
going to be an interesting one. But also because we've got these three characters, we can kind of do this Marvel Avengers thing where they'll release a poster with like everybody's on it.
yeah,
And it's an absolute kind of it can be a little bit of a mess, but then they'll do a series of just like a poster with Thor and a poster with Iron Man and a poster with Captain America and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And so it's this opportunity to create like one poster and then three more posters in line with that kind of hold true to that style and composition. So that was the kind of the main idea behind doing something like this and going for the style. It's also got a bit of a kind of like a Red Dead Redemption kind of illustration style vibe, which I really like. But yeah,
yeah.
that's the main idea that we're going for. So let's kind of get stuck into this a little bit more. Um, I've got this Firefly board, as I said. I've just got a bunch of different inspiration here. I've got a little bit of kind of Western vibe, kind of stuff like this. This is all quite sort of in the colors, very kind of Western. And then I've got more kind of like anime vibe things. I've got a whole bunch of different kind of illustrations here. And what I'd like to kind of try and do is a poster that feels a little bit more kind of like action driven. And so these manga pages with these frames really kind of capture a sense of like motion and action and often can
Mm.
be super interestingly composed as well. Like stuff like this is a page out of a comic book, but this could easily be a
A little bit
poster.
on that one.
Like, yeah,
Just pretty small.
easily it could be a poster if you added some type onto this, right? Like this
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
could be like some comic book cover or a poster or something. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do with this idea of kind of like using the frames and referencing comic books. Um, and the shot that the scene that I'm going for with this one is obviously that kind of final pinnacle scene where they do um, it's a truel, right? It's like a duel, but with all three of them.
Right.
And the cuts are like really epic and they really get through a lot of different things. So like we start out like wide shots on all three of the characters, and then it kind of zooms in a little bit more on all three, and then we get the eyes, and it just kind of keeps speeding up and cutting and building that tension. And so I'm kind of trying to emulate that a little bit. So what we've got with this one is starting to get that kind of a vibe. It's a little bit more just kind of like good old-fashioned Western vibes. As I said, I designed this maybe like 20 years ago. So forgive me if it's like it's not perfect. I'd change a lot of things, and like this is probably a good occasion to do so, a good opportunity to do this. But yeah, let's get a little bit kind of stuck into some of the basic kind of fundamental things that we've got. So we've got our inspiration set up. That's kind of the brief to myself. I'm trying to do good, bad, and the ugly, but in a slightly more modern take and maybe play with some type and composition and get something going there. But trying to keep a sense of action, trying to keep a sense of movement. Now, poster design, like I said, is a really kind of like it's super full on and it's really kind of like a concentrate of design skills kind of manifested into one image kind of thing. It sounds really kind of like epic and hardcore, but um, if done well, it can be, really quite stunning and really clever in design ideas. So some of the things that we have got number one principle is hierarchy is king, right? Like that's the most important thing. So our hierarchy is basically, if we look at some examples that we kind of had before, like this Jaws poster, we got a really good sense of what to look at first. And that's exactly what hierarchy is. It's like, where are we looking first? What are you reading first in a magazine? Or like, where does your eye get drawn to first? Then second, then third, fourth, and so on and so forth. So it really sets up this kind of order of reading. And if you mess it up, you can get some really poor results, or you can use it to kind kind of better effect to try and hide messages in there that people won't see until you want them to. So it's kind of like a punchline of a joke. Like, I'm going to put that information on this poster, but I'm going to design it so that you see it last, right? And like you read that last. So something like this is really like it's quite sort of a static composition. It's very kind of down the middle aligned. But first and foremost, we see the title Jaws, then we probably see the shark, and then we see the girl swimming, right? But
Yeah.
that's the hierarchy that we wanted to happen on that poster. That's on purpose. An example of bad hierarchy, and again, probably hate to kind of like bash on these things, but these sort of like tabloid magazines just like cram a ton of headlines in, and there's just no hierarchy anymore. Everything is competing for your attention. You don't know what to read first, second, third, and fourth, and it just creates this absolute jumble and a mess of a thing. So hierarchy is number one, right? If you mess up your hierarchy, you're not going to kind of read things correctly. Or, if you do this wrongly, you might kind of see the bad, the ugly, and the good. And it's like, that's not the title of the movie. That doesn't kind of gel well. So hierarchy is number one. Number two is the elements that you can kind of use on a poster. Now, you don't have to use all of them, but they're generally the ones that you will see most often on posters. We've got type, image, whether that's a photograph or an illustration, and then shapes, right? We've got graphic shapes, kind of elements that kind of come and play and kind of support all of that thing. So, make sure you're kind of using all of those together, or at least some of them. And then we've got our kind of fundamental design principles, right? These are the fundamental kind of building blocks of any design, whether that's a website, a poster, an illustration, you name it, that will kind of have those things. So number one, hierarchy, most important. Contrast is really good to have. So a good example of contrast in our kind of images here are these kind of Oceans 11 and 12 posters, right? We've got black, white, and red, really strong, vibrant colors clashing together to give us a good sense of contrast. That can be really kind of nice to see. Alignment is our next one. So that's really interesting as well. We can play around with a whole bunch of different things with our alignment. We use grids, we use rule of thirds, a whole bunch of different things. I don't want to get too kind of hardcore into it because we'll be here for hours, but you can get some really interesting stuff and some really interesting messages hidden into your artwork. So here's a good example of something that I was talking about before with this kind of Marvel poster. We've got this Star Wars poster where all of the characters are on there. We've got spaceships. We've got a ton of stuff happening on here. But underneath that, we've got some kind of hidden visuals of the alignment of these elements make a star. You can kind of see almost like a star destroyer in there as well. There's a
Yeah,
sense of kind of
totally. I've never seen this
composition.
before.
Yeah, it's not like you wouldn't see it and go like, oh, I think I can see a star in that composition. But
Yeah.
it's a nice kind of thing when you have so many ingredients going into a design, having a kind of a thread or an idea that's like, here's how I'm going to compose this and here's how I'm going to put this together is going to be really quite important. And it's not for nothing that like Kylo Ren's lightsaber and Rey's kind of weapon are aligned on that axis. And it's the same thing with Finn's lightsaber. It's just kind of like trying to get a good sense of kind of alignment and composition. So it doesn't need to be super static. Um, it can be a little bit more fun, but you can do some kind of cool things with it. And then finally, we've got balance and repetition. So balance and repetition are also kind of fundamental ideas. In our Jaws poster, we've got a good sense of balance. It's kind of down the middle. Here we've got a sense of kind of balance in terms of like we've got important elements down here and then on the left. So we've got a really kind of fundamentally well-balanced image. And then repetition is something that's going to be kind of interesting to look at. And it's more of a kind of a series thing, which is why I'm keen to do this kind of series of posters where here we've got a really strong design for Ocean's 11. We've got a very similar kind of vibe and style for Ocean's 12. And then Ocean's 13, they've just gone
I
completely
just
new
gave up.
designer, just gave up on that. And so this repetition is kind of a bit of a fail, right? Like number one, number two, yep. And then 13 comes out and you're expecting this and you get this instead. And it's like, yeah,
It's such a
that doesn't,
disappointment, isn't it? Like you
yeah,
put
yeah,
them all together, it's completely uncreative. It looks like a DVD
it totally
cover
does. Yeah.
from the like early 2000s or something.
Yeah. And these ones are actually designed by Neville Brody, who's a really famous and
Wow.
strong designer, does some really cool type design. And so I guess maybe they couldn't afford him for the third one. I don't know, but there's
Maybe he said no.
something has happened here where it's just maybe he
Something's
said no.
happened.
But also, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be multiple posters. So here we've got a sense of repetition of a concept. And this is probably one of my favorite posters of all time, actually. And this is by a French designer called Philippe Apologue. Um, Look him up if you don't know him. Does really, really good things with type, always with type in there. But this is for a poster exhibition. All right. So it's this kind of like, wow, you're really entering the meta game now. You're trying to do a poster that showcases posters. And what he's
Yeah.
done is really clever. Like he's just used a bunch of different A4 posters and then put in the titles. There's a lot of type to put in. And he's used that to say the word posters and then kind of done these folds with color. So there's a repetition of an idea here. Once you understand, like, oh, that's an E, you look for that same concept of repetition across the H and the T, and you can start to get the idea behind that kind of thing. So
That's so nice. I have seen that one before, but
yeah,
it's just so good.
it's so smart, right? Like it's such a like economy of means, really clever. And you look at it and you have that kind of moment where you go like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's cool. Um, and so that's our kind of fundamental design principles. And then lastly, as just kind of an extra, use of negative space and leading the eye. So those things are really kind of interesting to work with in posters. And it's something, negative space is something that I see a lot of my students kind of feel like they have to just fill the entire surface area of the poster. That's not the case. You can get some really cool implied shapes and ideas with just using negative space. So in this instance, we got the lobster, and you can see that there's a person kind of missing there. He's obviously hugging somebody, but we don't see that. Or we can use the negative space to kind of include another image in this. And this is the kind of something that Noma Bard does really well. So Noma Bard's another designer, does really awesome images using negative space often. And so you look at this and it's just kind of like an economy of means. And within the design, you see a kind of a second level of reading where here we've got a suit and tie, but it's also kind of like a pair of legs with high heels and a skirt. And so it's just kind of like we've only got one illustration, but there's two illustrations within it. So it's a really interesting thing to use. And then finally, we've got this idea of leading the eye. So leading the eye is all about composition. This shot from Avengers Endgame is kind of like a classic example of that. So literally just things pointing to Captain America on his own and just kind of really leading your eye to look at this one and not everything else first. So this is hierarchy. We've got a good sense of contrast. We've got a good sense of balance. We've got alignment. We've got leading the eye. All of these images are using multiple ones of these principles as they go. So it's always a kind of a fun thing to kind of try and analyze and look at and using some of those principles with our designs.
Yeah. Awesome. Love that.
So let's get stuck into some kind of actual creation here. So I've started making some sketches, some concept sketches for all of this. And we can kind of see there's an idea in most of these. We've got like a bit of a sense of balance, but also movement in this one. Here I've got a good sense of hierarchy where I'm heroing Clint Eastwood's character, and then we go down and then down and then down here. So there's this bit of a kind of a sense of hierarchy where we've got the type kind of blocking out and kind of using that as a clipping mask to show an illustration within. Um, sorry.
Right.
So there's a bunch of different kind of things happening within this, but we could, repeat that a little bit. And I would do this often when kind of designing for posters, obviously try and get that format right. So we get kind of a good sense of balance. But what can we do here that's going to be interesting with our kind of three characters and kind of trying to get them all three into there? So we could do kind of like a paper tear and just kind of have their faces and the eyes kind of, that these shots like that. So we could do something like this where it's just the close up of all three of the eyes and we can kind of recognize the characters and we've got the type down here. So that'll be a good kind of sense of repetition as well. So really kind of loose, quick thumbnails here, really just trying to mess around with different types of compositions, and thinking about, you know, what can we do here? What could be fun? That's not an A size representation. There we go. It's a bit better. Um, how can we go into like playing around with different ideas, and maybe even like if I look at something like, sorry, going back into my Firefly here and looking at things like this, where we've got a good amount of negative space underneath, or where the space is being used to kind of create a bit of a landscape for a main illustration, and then we've got some other things going on in there. So we could kind of do our same kind of thing here. And maybe we can have like the cemetery that they're kind of sitting in as a bit of a kind of a dynamic thing, the kind of the dimensions of your A size document. You could literally, because my document is an A size document to begin with, I could actually just take this, duplicate it, invert it, rotate it, and then I can squash it down to create. Oh, this is actually not an A size document.
That looks really long.
Yeah, I did this at 1080, but my other document up here is an A size, but you could just take this and duplicate it and then kind of use that as your thing. The reason I do this, the reason it's important to kind of match the A size in here is this is going to be the thing that you kind of build on and kind of, you know, work to. So if you've kind of provided more space, if it goes down here into kind of like a wider format, and this is where our type's going to be and our illustrations all up here, when you actually start to put this into an actual A size document, you're going to be like, oh man, it doesn't work as well. So it's important to kind of lay the foundations of that well when you start, so that you won't kind of reach any kind of disappointment when you get there. But yeah, coming back to our concepts and stuff, like something like this is cool. So we got the C3PO, and then inside of C3PO silhouette, we've got more illustrations. So we could do this with something like this. So we've got, you know, like Clint's character, and we can just make that kind of, again, maybe it's a little bit more kind of dynamic, and it's just going to be a silhouette here. And we're going to try and get his hat in there, and maybe there's like a hint of a gun. Really, really very loose kind of stuff. And then within this is going to be maybe the other two characters are kind of standing over here in the kind of the cemetery, and we're kind of seeing that kind of vibe going. And then the type.
Called that get double exposure kind of thing, or
yeah, exactly.
What that was. Yeah.
So again, like we're playing around with different kind of design principles, thinking about what kind of works well. And where this goes, and keeping it really loose and super fast, so I can do loads and loads of explorations really, really quickly and get something that I'm going to feel good about and kind of working towards as well. Now, I would also, if this was a client brief, I would number these and just put a little kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 underneath them, just so that when I send these to my client, they don't have to go like the third one from the right on the top. No, number 3, number 4, we like that one.
The typey one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, can we have the type from number 2, but with the illustration from number 6? Like, cool. That's easy. Really nice to kind of work that way. So I'm kind of feeling this one the most, number 2. I also kind of like this one, but I think this number 2 is probably going to be the one that's going to enable me to kind of work a little bit closer to my brief that I set myself, which is this kind of like frames, get a bit of a dynamic composition, and then be able to take this into 3 separate posters where I've got a good sense of repetition, where it's like Clint, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach, and then we've got type and type and type, and that's going to create a good kind of series and still kind of have this kind of dynamic thing. So I'm going to work with that one to start with. Okay, so where do we go from here? Because these sketches are really loose. Obviously, we want some kind of likeness to these characters. So I've actually got a little bit of a, and I've done that on my background layer. That's okay. That doesn't matter. I do this often where I just paint on my background layer and it's like, oh man, oops. Let's hide this, and we're gonna kind of get these characters. So again, these are just kind of screenshots that I've taken from the movie and that scene itself. So that kind of triple duel scene. And they're the shots that I feel kind of represent that kind of the most. I also want to set Clint as kind of like he's the main character, but he's also kind of set apart because it's kind of like these two guys against this guy. He's the good and he's the bad and the ugly. So it's kind of like we want to try and get that kind of conflict happening in there. But
imagine the casting of that. You're like, and who am I playing?
yeah, oh, you're the ugly. Like,
you're the ugly. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
well, actually, I mean that's the English title, but in the original, in French and Italian and Spanish, it's like the truant or the like the bad guy. Yeah, it's not. He's not the ugly in any other language than English, which is a bit of a stooge, but
maybe he was just hard to work with on set, and they're like, you know what?
Possibly. But yeah, so we kind of want a little bit of a stylization here, and obviously I'm working from photographs, so I can kind of try and work to something like this and go like, all right, Clint's got this hat on and it's kind of going like this, and then we've got this kind of head shape. But I find that a little bit boring. First of all, I'm not very good at portraits, don't tell anyone. We're not live, right?
Don't worry about it.
But also I feel like it's kind of just like not super interesting to me to kind of get that likeness exactly how it is. It's also not what my kind of brief is trying to go for, this kind of cartoony stylization. I also really like this sort of work. So this is Ashley Woods, one of my favorite illustrators. Does some really fun stuff with just kind of this inky kind of vibe, really graphic. So I'm going to try and do something like this. So I want to stylize these characters a little bit, but for anybody kind of struggling with portraits and how do you take a real live action portrait and then kind of turn it into something that's a bit cartoony and a bit more expressive, here's a little bit of a hack that I use. And this is a little bit of a cheat, but I'm going to rasterize this layer. In fact, I'm going to do this with Lee Van Cleef's character because he's probably the easiest one to do it with. And I'm going to caricaturize him a little bit more. So if we look at Lee Van Cleef, he's the bad guy in this. He's got a really kind of like bad guy face. He's got a sharp nose, little eyes, very sunken in cheeks, very kind of sharp features all around. So he's got that kind of like, Disney bad guy look. And so we're going to exaggerate that a little bit. And so we're going to take this and I'm actually going to liquefy this portrait. And we're going to zoom in here and I'm going to look at, all right, what are some of the main features? Sorry, I'm just going to exit that and bring this a little bit kind of closer into the middle so it fits more into my frame when I'm liquefying. There we go. We're going to look at this and go, all right, he's got a very sharp, pointy nose. He's got pretty prominent cheekbones sunken in over here. The eyes are quite small. And so we've got this kind of vibe where I'm going to try and kind of accentuate that. So I'm going to bring the nose down, sharpen it up. I'm going to bring the cheekbones in a little bit more. So bring the cheeks in, bring the cheekbones out, increase that frown, get those eyes looking really small. Maybe kind of get the chin down to be a little bit more kind of pointy as well. So I'm literally just kind of caricaturizing this guy into something that I can then take and kind of work to as a reference a little bit better. And so it's super fun to kind of do that, I think. Clint and Lee Van Cleef have both very characteristic faces, very easy to caricaturize. Eli Wallach's character is a little bit trickier. It's not as distinctive in the features with that. So that can sometimes be a little bit tricky to look at. But if you kind of have a look, what I've done here is that basic kind of same exercise on slightly different photographs. So again, accentuating the cheeks. On Clint, I've really kind of prolonged his face, like really drawn it down. And on Eli Wallach, I've just kind of given him that, like, yeah. I mean, look, there's tons of caricatures out there of that character because he's got such a distinctive face and really kind of interesting look.
It's funny
so
though,
I've
'cause it's
used
a drawing,
those.
you just kind of like, cool, yeah, like it's just an artistic license. When you've actually liquefied their face,
Yeah,
it's like a whole nother extreme. It's so funny. It's outrageous.
totally. And
like a
like, and
funhouse
again,
mirror.
like, you know, not everybody's going to be happy to have this done to their faces. And if the brief is likeness, then obviously this is going to be a massive fail.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from those, I have then created these sketches, and these sketches are the ones that I'm
Yeah.
going to
They
use.
look
And I've
awesome.
got like, I feel like they're recognizable enough to be like, yeah, that's Clint, that's Lee Van Cleef, and that's Eli Wallach, but they're stylized a little bit, and I can work to those a little bit more kind of clearly. And then I've also added in a sense of kind of lighting in here. Very simply, I'm trying to get that kind of like, noon sun is kind of beating down and kind of catching the hat and casting a
Mm.
shadow on their face. But a lot of the shots in the movie are also kind of like there's a little bit of bounce light happening from underneath. So I really try and get that as well a little bit. So I'm kind of ready now. I've got my kind of ingredients a little bit. I don't have any type yet, but I've got the main illustrations, and that's where we're going to kind of start from, and then we can kind of look at type tomorrow in terms of kind of working with that. So I'm going to make a new document. We're going to go A3, so we're going to go print, view all presets. We're going to go A3, 300 DPI. I'm going to work to RGB as well. Theoretically, I should probably work to CMYK because I'll be printing this, but I like to work with RGB, and you can actually print RGB nowadays. Don't let anybody tell you any different. It is possible. So I've got my poster, and I'm just going to bring in my three characters here. So I'm going to group these guys in and bring them in. Whoopsie-doo. And we're going to go to group. Bang. And I'm going to bring that into my composition here. And we're going to go back to our concept sketches. And I'm going to bring in that concept sketch as well, just as a kind of a basis for that work to kind of go on to. So I'm going to bring that in, and I'm going to increase the size of this all the way up and just kind of fit that more or less roughly into there. I don't really care that it's going to be massively pixelated because it's just a rough kind of composition guideline with that, right? I'm also going to merge these two layers so I can move them around more individually. So we're going to start with Clint's at the top, and we might get rid of his smoke as well because he's not actually got that cigarette's not actually kind of smoking in the thing. We might bring it back depending on kind of composition, but yeah. Little tip for you guys as well. I covered this in a recent video actually. If you've got three elements on the same layer, in order to kind of cut them out and put them onto their own layer, Command Shift and J at the same time will cut. Whoops, what's that? Why has that not happened? Command Shift J. There we go. We've cut Clint out of that frame, and he's now kind of separated from the other two. So it's just a really quicker way of kind of cutting, pasting with just the one shortcut. I tend to use that quite a bit. We're going to place him here, and we're going to grab this guy as well. So we're going to bring Eli back into frame. I'm on a first name basis with these guys, in case you didn't know.
We have a question from chat, which is a good
Yo.
question. So Dino asks, Dino, because it's Dino Rex. Really, I thought you always had to change from RGB to CMYK to print. Is there any specific setting for it?
No, there isn't. It's the printer on the printer side. So good printers. I use a guy, a friend of mine called Robert Wade, who's really sort of highly specializes in printing, and he has an RGB CMYK printer. So it's actually, you just set up your file as an RGB. It's fine. You might have to kind of work to certain color spaces. That's just a liaising with your printer. But in order to print RGB, you literally just leave your file as an RGB, and that color information will go into the RGB CMYK printer. So it's literally just a printer that has extra inks that are able to match up to RGB workspace, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But yeah, this old thing of like, CMYK is, if you're printing, it's always going to be CMYK. That's not really the case anymore, and it's not super widespread. And most printers will probably still default you to like, no, we can't print RGB. because they don't have the necessary tech. But if anybody tells you like you can't print RGB, that's just flat out wrong. You absolutely can nowadays. It's a little bit more pricey and it's not as sort of commonly done. But you can, and it will preserve your like neon blues and pinks and all those kind of super vibrant colors that CMYK tends to kind of mute a fair bit in some color cases. It just means that you get a much more kind of wider range of colors that you can work to. So if you can find yourself an RGB CMYK printer out there who works in RGB and CMYK, you'd be really kind of good to print your own stuff. Just be aware that some printers might just kind of push back on that, be like, no, that's not possible. What are you talking about? You can't print CMYK RGB. It's a good question though, but yeah.
It's probably to do with your area as well. It's probably something you should look into, like before you start.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Like maybe find someone, like make sure there's someone in your area that you can maybe get a sample from or chat to first and that sort of thing. But yeah, you might.
Absolutely.
I remember leaving design school and they're like, develop a good relationship with a good printer. Like
100%. 100%. If you're a digital artist, your printer has obviously an enormous impact on what you put out, right? Like if your image looks great on your screen, but then it's for a show or it's for a print that you're going to sell and it comes out looking really crappy on the print, then your image is crappy. It doesn't matter how good it is on the screen. If when it leaves into the real world, the transition is bad, your artwork's going to suffer massively. So yeah, I cannot overstate that idea of like having a good relationship with a printer, talking to your printer, asking questions, listening to them, setting up your files correctly. All of that stuff really matters. If you're a digital artist making prints, it's everything, absolutely everything.
Cool.
Yeah, so we've got our main three guys here. And I'm going to put layer masks on these guys now to kind of frame them into their compositions. So I'm going to pop a layer mask on Clint. And we're going to go in and just do this very, very roughly. And actually, I'm actually going to delete that layer mask for now because I want it to apply to the selection that I've created. So there we go. Bang. Doing this again, still really roughly at this stage. We're just trying to get a sense of kind of composition in here. Now I'm also going to unlink all of these layer masks because I want to be able to move the illustration within that mask without kind of affecting the actual where the mask is. So I want to be able to kind of work to that a little bit, playing around with different sizes, like how much do I focus in on the eyes, conscious that I'm cutting out a fair bit of the illustration that I put in here, but we're just trying to get a good sense of composition with these cuts and angles that we've created, and get a good sense of kind of contrast and balance as well in there. So that's going to be really quite important going forward. And I want to bring it in a little bit closer to their eyes because their eyes are really kind of the most expressive part of those shots. It's like that's when it reaches the pinnacle of the action, is when we're just kind of only seeing the eyes. And it's that classic kind of dual shot where it's like just the eyes and I'm staring and it's like, you know, stuff's about to go down. All right, cool. So now I can kind of bring in some frames. I'm going to work with a slightly kind of like more brushy, like markery type brush, and kind of draw in the frames that we're working to. So these frames are going to be quite sort of illustrative again. I want this to feel quite sort of action driven and a little bit rough, like this kind of style, or this. We can see the brush strokes, right? We can see the handwork that's gone in. It's not been too kind of cleaned up and vectorized. So we can work to that a little bit more kind of cleanly. And this is really going to help frame these guys into their shots a little bit more. And we can start to really see this poster kind of coming together now.
Do you ever
with
like
all
rotate your canvas to like turn like an angle? Like
yeah, I will do. Absolutely. I'll
like
try and get that. If the angles are a bit awkward, I'll absolutely try and do that. On straight lines, probably a little bit less, but if I'm working with curves and stuff, 100%, I will always kind of rotate an angle, like the canvas, to try and get that line to be kind of working a little bit more kind of better with what I'm trying to do. Yeah. And now we can get a sense of where the type's going to potentially go, right? So we're going to play around. Again, I'm going to just do this with kind of script. I'm going to name these layers as well. There's a thing in beta now, I think in Photoshop beta, where you can get AI to auto-name your layers, or maybe even just this one.
Just
There we go.
there.
Rename
Yeah,
layers.
I've been waiting. I really wanted to say it, and then I was like, oh, let's wait until there's some type out there, and it can delete unused
Let's see.
layers.
Let's see what it says about this. So let's undo that. There we go. So it's layer 10.
It's right near my camera. Like it's like right here. It's right down the bottom. The little like sweepy, like little broom.
This guy right here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to click on that, say rename layers across the entire document. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it picks up on that. Maybe it'll just call it rectangles. 3 black rectangles. Hey, there you go. It's not bad. Not bad. What's it called? My characters. Obviously, it hasn't. Man with hat and cigar. Pretty solid. Man's face in sketch. Partial face sketch drawing. It's not super helpful, but man with hat and cigars, not bad. And 3 frames is pretty good too. Like, that's not bad. And then hand-drawn sketch artwork. Yeah, pretty solid. So yeah. And then I will just come in here with some type just to do this a little bit more kind of roughly. And we're just playing around with composition at this stage, right? And seeing kind of what is kind of working, what's maybe not working. Do we put the ampersand down here and then the bad? Or the ugly. Bang. There we go. The good probably needs to be a little bit bigger. So again, this is just me like messing around, trying to get a sense of kind of like occupying the negative space a little bit more. So looking at this from a distance and going, all right, what's the balance like? I feel like it's probably a little bit heavy over here. So we've got a little bit of just kind of like a lot stuff happening here, and then we've got a lot of negative space down here. So this illustration kind of feels like it's kind of sliding down that way a little bit. So I'm feeling like I need maybe the ugly to be a little bit bigger and kind of maybe come down into this area a little bit more, just to kind of fill that space a little bit more cleanly. Potentially also the entire thing needs to just become just a little bit more smaller and a bit more centered. Still not great. I'm feeling a little bit of an imbalance happening still. I'm going to grab all of these layers. Here we go. And duplicate and merge them down. I'm going to hide all of these. And now I can play around with all of my information that I've had without kind of worrying too much about where it's all kind of going. So this is crucial for me to do this. Again, like I said, we're probably not going to get in too deep into kind of finalized artwork. But this is the base of left, that.
I would say not at that time.
We're just trying to get the right composition. Also because this is going to be a movie poster. And if this is a real live brief, we're probably also going to have client logos down here, so pictures and then like cast and crew. So it's important to kind of put those in there as well to see kind of, all right, how's this going to work when everything, all the mandatories of that poster are in there. That's going to be really important to kind of work to. So I'm feeling that composition a little bit more. We can maybe accentuate the kind of a difference in between all of these characters again, some more with this kind of like placing these elements around. I can also then now come in with a sense of like, all right, do I have a bit of a background now where I'm going to put in this kind of a hint of a cemetery in the background, and that's going to be a little bit of a base for my work. So I can kind of put that in there, drop the opacity down a little bit, and it's going to give a little bit more kind of like situational kind of work to that kind of composition. And maybe there's even kind of like a hint of a midday sun up there Do I like it? Do I not like it? Unsure at this stage. It's just kind of fun to play around with it a little bit more, and maybe we can come in and kind of play with the negative space of like really increase this sense of like a cemetery happening here. Um, I don't mind it. It's not
Yeah, it's cool.
necessarily the best, but could be fun. And now I can start to mess around with colors a little bit. So,
I like where the type is, like where it's situated.
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like, this will be maybe a bit different, depending on the style. I could leave it just kind of handcrafted like this, or I could go with like a proper type. We'll see where kind of like this lands a little bit kind of more tomorrow. But I might want to kind of fill in the negative spaces behind these as well. So we've got like a little bit more kind of frame variance happening in there as well. So we're going to fill that and fill that. And I've purposely kind of worked in black and white at this stage, obviously, because it saves me kind of like a ton of work of having to mess around with colors. And at this stage, I'm not there yet. I'm just trying to get a good sense of composition and action happening in this shot. That's what I'm most concerned about right now. So important to kind of like, pick your battles at this stage and kind of see where everything is going. So bringing in a little bit more light. And then I'm going to put a gradient map on top of all of this. And because I'm working in black and white, it's going to start to bring in a bit of a sense of overall colors. So I can go, okay, cool. Obviously this kind of fits, like it's a hot kind of Western kind of vibe. That's pretty cool. We could go wild and go like with this, but that just doesn't fit the theme at all. That's not, that's not terrible. It's going to get a little bit more interesting. But I am kind of leaning towards this, this color range of like warm oranges, reds, yellows, that sort of vibe. So we can go mess around then and come into this guy and say, cool, maybe I want a little bit more contrast in the black. So I want the black to increase. I want the reds to be a little bit darker. Overall yellow is not bad, but maybe we just want an extra color in here that's going to bring in a little bit more contrast with the background. And so this gradient map is just mapping to a grayscale map, right? So anywhere that is noticing like all the darks are going to be black. But if I was to say like, okay, bring in a lighter color over here for like this blue, you'll notice that all the bits that were black are now going to be this blue. So obviously not great for this one, but we can really kind of start to mess around with this kind of sense of contrast happening in here.
We'll have to leave it there for today because I know we're going to continue on tomorrow. So we'll recap the gradient maps and I think pick it up from there tomorrow because we've got another stream coming up, guys, with Del Bogini, and he's got to jump in. We've got to set up for that. This has been awesome, Jeremy. It's been so much fun. I really love it.
It's fun to kind of go through the process a little bit more and kind of not end with a final result. But yeah, we'll pick this up tomorrow and kind of look where this composition goes and kind of try and clean it up a little bit more tomorrow.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, come and join us again. And if you're watching live, stick around. We just need to do some stuff in the background and then we'll be back with Del Bogini in less than 10 minutes. So